So I want to talk about one person in particular who was killed without being convicted. This man's name was Giles Corey. He was an 81-year-old farmer from Salem. His wife had been arrested, and he, in fact, had been caught up in the hysteria in his community, and he actually believed that she was guilty. He believed the accusations until he was accused himself, and he said, I know I'm not a witch, so I no longer believe my wife is a witch either. He actually refused to plead innocent or guilty. So the law at the time required you to plead innocent or guilty. You couldn't refuse to say either one. And the law allowed you to be tortured to force you to plead innocent or guilty. He was ordered to be tortured, a board was placed on his chest, and rocks were gradually piled on him over a long period of time, increasing that weight. For 2 days he was kept here, and when they asked him what he wanted to plead, all he would say is more weight. And finally he dies. It was very rare to be pressed to death because torture works, not in the sense of getting the truth, but torture works about getting people to talk, especially because to even say you're innocent, he believed he was innocent, and so why wouldn't he say it? Why would he die before saying it? And the reason he didn't is because according to the law, because he had not pled guilty or innocent, the trial could not go forward. Because he had not been convicted, his estate was not seized by the government, so he could pass it on to his children. So he basically allowed himself to be tortured to death so that his children could receive their inheritance. In all, at least 156 people were accused of witchcraft in this time period. 113 were arrested and 20 executed, including Corey. So if you look at the people who were accused, the people who were the accusers, you start to see some connections. You see that the accusers are accusing people who their families had feuds with. One of them was a former pastor of Salem, and he ends up being killed. Even though he's a pastor, he's killed for witchcraft. And remember, Salem was a very contentious town. You can imagine that families were talking about this, and people were hearing it. And a lot of the accusers, though not all, a lot of them were girls. You remember it started with 9 and 11-year-olds. You have a lot of young women, a lot of girls playing a huge role in this. And a big factor of this must have been hearing things talked about, hearing gossip in the home, and then eventually that turns into accusations of witchcraft, and that turns into people dying. So there was a man in Salem named John Proctor. He had a servant girl named Mary Warren, and she had these symptoms that a lot of people were having of being tormented. And this is what he said: "If they were let alone, we should all be devils and witches quickly. They should rather be had to the whipping post. When she was first taken with fits, I kept her close for a while and threatened to thrash her. And then she had no more fits, till the next when I was gone forth." So he's saying basically they just need to be punished, and then they will stop having these fits. And what do you know? He and his wife are both accused of witchcraft by his servant Mary along with others. And they're convicted, even though they, like a lot of the other people who are convicted, 32 neighbors wrote in support of them saying these are good people, these are not witches. John was executed. His wife Elizabeth, she was pregnant when she was convicted, so she was allowed to give birth. By the time she gives birth, by that time the trial was ended and she was spared. John Alden was accused. He was the son of John Alden and Priscilla Mullins from Plymouth, and he ends up escaping prison. By the time he returns, the trials were over, so he escapes punishment. Like I said, people of too high social standing who were accused, it was just let slide. Lady Mary Phipps, the wife of the governor, was accused. She was not convicted, she was not tried, she was not executed. Because in that case, we all know, of course, the accuser must be mistaken. So while this court is still in session, word gets out about what's going on and begins to spread. People realize that things were getting worse and not better. There were more accusations and not less. They could not believe that there was this much witchcraft in a Puritan town. One big factor playing into all of this is that it was a very important time in Massachusetts history. The king had just revoked the charter of Massachusetts, and they were lobbying William and Mary for a new charter. Governor Phipps, the governor of Massachusetts, he is allied with Increase Mather, an influential Puritan pastor. Phipps and Mather did not want to embarrass Massachusetts about having this big witchcraft-ish problem with witchcraft and risk getting that charter revoked and having the government set up with more control from England. Increase Mather's son is Cotton Mather, also a pretty influential person. He did not fully endorse the trials. He had certain concerns about them at times. He had concerns about the use of spectral evidence, and these are things that he was talking about, he was advising people on. But he did publish a book to defend them called Wonders of the Invisible World. And some people have called this a cover-up, and that he was in a conspiracy, or he was influenced by the governor to say, let's cover this up, let's say whatever's happening here was fine, was dealt with properly, but then what we're going to do is we're going to end the trials and not let them proceed. So a lot of people were concerned with the trials, but what they did was they worked to end the trials and then worked to suppress them and not let the word get out. But there were people who were standing up and saying people need to know what went on here in Salem. One of these men was Robert Califf. He was a weaver. He collected his own evidence. He got transcripts of the trials, and he ends up publishing a book called More Wonders of the Invisible World. But because the governor and the Mathers were working against letting this word get out, letting the truth of what happened here get out, he had to get it published over in London and shipped back to the colonies. So, as I said, people were realizing that what happened was wrong. And there were movements toward repentance. The governor proclaimed a fast day on January 14th, 1697, a few years after the trials. And this is what he said when proclaiming the fast day. God is pleased to still go on in diminishing our substance, cutting short our harvest, blasting our most promising undertakings in more ways than one, unsettling us, although considering the many sins prevailing in the midst of us. We cannot but wonder at the patience and mercy moderating these rebukes. And he told them to pray that he would shew us what we know not, especially that whatever mistakes on either hand have been fallen into, either by the body of this people or any orders of men, referring to the late tragedy raised among us by Satan and his instruments through the awful judgment of God. So there he's publicly saying, God, show us the mistakes that we made in dealing with this trial, whether it was in the people or in the rulers. Samuel Sewall, as I said, he was a judge. He was from Salem, and he was convicted that he had sinned as a judge. And he actually saw the hand of God in judging him in his life. He had a 2-year-old daughter named Sarah, and between the governor proclaimed the fast and the day of the fast, his daughter died. And so the fast day, he gave a paper, he wrote up a paper to be read in the church, saying, Samuel Sewall, sensible of the reiterated strokes of God upon himself and his family, and being sensible that as to the guilt contracted on the opening of the late commission of Aurier and Terminer in Salem, he desires to take the blame and shame of it, asking pardon of men, and especially desiring prayers that God, who has unlimited authority, would pardon that sin. So he's realizing, he's saying, I did wrong, put the blame upon me, I'm repenting of my sins in this matter. 12 jury members also publicly and jointly repented. They said in part, we confess that we ourselves were not capable to understand nor able to withstand the mysterious delusions of the powers of darkness. We fear we have been instrumental with others, though ignorantly and unwittingly, to bring upon ourselves and this people of the Lord the guilt of innocent blood. We do therefore humbly beg forgiveness, first of all, of God for Christ's sake. We do heartily ask forgiveness of you all, whom we have justly offended. So they also are repenting and saying, we were deceived, we acted wrongly, and because of that, innocent blood was shed. So I'll just finish up with one of the actual accusers, Ann Putnam. She was the only accuser that there's records of her repenting. She was one of the primary accusers. In 1699, after the trials, her parents died. She had to raise her younger siblings, and she never married. And before she could join the church, had to profess her faith, and she wrote a confession to be read in the church. She said this: "I, then being in my childhood, by such a providence of God, was made an instrument for the accusing of several people for grievous crimes, whereby their lives were taken away from them, whom now I have just grounds and good reason to believe they were innocent persons. I did it not out of any anger, malice, or ill will to any person, for I had no such thing against any one of them. But what I did was ignorantly, being deluded by Satan. I desire to lie in the dust, and to be humble for it, and that I was a cause with others of so sad a calamity to them and their families. For which cause I desire to lie in the dust, and earnestly beg forgiveness of God, and from all those unto whom I have given just cause of sorrow and offense, whose relations were taken away or accused." So she's repenting. She's saying that she was deceived by Satan. She is asking forgiveness for those who would have been in that church whose families had died because of her accusation. And so this was accepted by the church, accepted by at least some of the family members of the victims, and she's brought into church membership. One interesting kind of epilogue to this is that it seems, if you look at the court records, that this time of year, all these accusations, primarily by women, ended up rendering as such that women's accusations of men committing crimes were not believed as much after these years, which is an unfortunate thing, as that people were not trusting the accusations that people were making. When you look at the number of crimes that were prosecuted before and after this time, not for witchcraft but for other things, it seemed like it put women as a whole in the society in bad repute, saying, who knows, maybe these are just more false accusations.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and share it with your friends. You can also visit www.discerninghistory.com for more videos and other resources.